The ban didn't just happen. It detonated overnight without warning, without precedent. The United States drew a line across the Atlantic and told she was no longer welcome. Not delayed, not rescheduled, banned. And within hours, the fragile balance holding the Western alliance together began to crack in ways no one was prepared to contain. Before we roll the footage, just one thing. If you enjoy our work, drop a like and hit subscribe. Over 98% of you are watching without subscribing. Let's change that right now. It's free for you, but it fuels everything we do. Subscribed? Perfect. Now enjoy the video. Because this wasn't just about a meeting. It was about power, control, and a silent war that had been building for years beneath polite diplomacy and staged handshakes. Or it started with a document that was never meant to leave Brussels. A classified strategy memo circulated among a handful of senior European Commission officials, outlining what insiders later described as the most aggressive economic repositioning plan in EU history. According to sources cited by and quietly echoed by the document proposed sweeping regulatory actions targeting major American industries, from tech to defence contractors, with projected impacts reaching hundreds of billions. But the language inside wasn't just economic, it was strategic, clinical, almost surgical. It spoke of rebalancing dependency and neutralising external leverage. Washington didn't read it as policy. Washington read it as a declaration. Within 36 hours of the leak, the document had crossed the Atlantic and landed inside a classified briefing folder on the desk of what happened next bypassed diplomacy entirely. No warning was issued, no ambassador was summoned. Instead, a directive was signed, sealed, and transmitted through official channels. Von der Leyen's access to the White House was revoked immediately. No entry, no bilateral talks, no presence on American soil for official engagement. The message was blunt, immediate, final. Washington went silent after the announcement, but the media didn't. Within minutes, headlines exploded across global networks. Unprecedented rupture, diplomatic shockwave, transatlantic crisis. Analysts from appeared across networks, warning that the move shattered decades of diplomatic protocol. And one senior fellow described it as the most aggressive personal sanction ever imposed on a Western allies leader. And yet behind the outrage, there was confusion. Why escalate this far, this fast? What wasn't the public being told? Von der Leyen's first response was calm. Too calm. A brief statement calling for constructive dialogue and mutual respect. But inside Brussels, the mood was anything but composed. Advisers were divided. Some urged immediate de-escalation. Others warned that backing down would permanently weaken Europe's position on the global stage. And in the middle of that storm stood von der Leyen, facing the most dangerous decision of her career. Retreat or retaliate? She chose retaliation. 48 hours after the ban, an emergency session of EU leadership was convened behind closed doors. No press. No leaks, at least not initially. What emerged hours later stunned even seasoned observers. Von der Leyen had proposed a coordinated response that went far beyond economics. According to insiders, she framed it as a defining moment for European sovereignty. Her argument was simple but explosive. If the United States could unilaterally isolate Europe's leadership, then Europe could no longer rely on American partnership as a stable foundation. The room fell silent as she outlined the next step. Suspend key areas of strategic cooperation. Not permanently, not officially, but enough to send a message. Intelligence coordination, defence logistics, joint cyber operations, elements that had quietly bound the transatlantic alliance together for decades. The proposal didn't mention by name, but everyone in the room understood the implication. Touch those systems and you don't just strain the alliance. You risk breaking it. The vote was close, tense, divisive. Larger nations hesitated, smaller ones panicked. Eastern members, particularly those closest to Russia, reportedly pushed back hard, warning of immediate security risks. But momentum carried the motion forward. Not unanimously, not comfortably, but decisively enough to proceed. And when the result leaked, the reaction was instant. Markets plunged. The euro dipped sharply against the dollar. Defence stocks surged in the United States and faltered across Europe. Social media erupted with hashtags like #Atlantic Split and #NATO Crisis trending globally within hours. Analysts scrambled to interpret what this meant. Was this a bluff, a negotiation tactic, or the beginning of something irreversible? Washington's response came faster than anyone expected. There was no press conference, no televised address, just a series of confirmed reports that sent shockwaves through every major capital. The Pentagon had been instructed to review troop deployments across Europe. Contingency plans were being updated. Logistics chains reassessed. It wasn't a withdrawal. Not yet, but it was a signal, a very clear one. Behind the scenes, calls flooded into Washington from European leaders. Urgent, repeated, largely unanswered. One senior diplomat described it as a wall of silence more terrifying than any statement, because silence meant certainty. It meant the decision had already been made. And then came the leak that changed everything. A second document, this one from inside the European Commission itself, far more detailed. Far more controversial. It outlined not just short-term responses, but a long-term vision for a Europe less dependent on American systems entirely. Independent defence structures, autonomous intelligence capabilities, a financial framework designed to operate without reliance on US-dominated institutions. It wasn't just a reaction plan. It was a blueprint for separation. When that document reached Washington, the tone shifted. What had been viewed as escalation was now seen as transformation. Not a temporary crisis, but a strategic pivot. And suddenly the question wasn't whether tensions could be reduced. It was whether the alliance itself could survive. Public opinion fractured almost immediately. Polls cited by major outlets suggested a growing divide. In Europe, support for stronger independence surged in some regions, while others expressed deep concern over security risks. In the United States, sentiment hardened. Commentators framed the situation as a long overdue reckoning. Allies or competitors? One headline asked. Increasingly, it seemed the answer was no longer clear. Inside Brussels, pressure mounted on von der Leyen from all sides. Critics accused her of miscalculation. Supporters praised her for standing firm. But even among allies, there was unease. Had she pushed too far? Too fast? And more importantly, was there any path back? Because behind every headline, every statement, every strategic move, there was a deeper reality taking shape. The structures that had defined Western unity for generations were being tested in real time. Not through war, not through external threat, but through internal fracture. And fractures, once they spread, are almost impossible to contain. Now, as both sides brace for what comes next, one question hangs over every decision, every meeting, every silent phone call. Is this a temporary rupture or the beginning of a permanent divide? Will Europe follow through on its path toward independence, even at the cost of security? Will the United States recalibrate or double down on disengagement? And if neither side backs down, what happens to the alliance that once defined global stability? Because what we are witnessing isn't just a political dispute. It's a turning point. And the next 48 hours may decide everything. Stay alert, stay informed. And if you want the truth behind the headlines as this story unfolds, subscribe now. Because what happens next, they won't explain until it's already too late.